The council erupted into chatter, some skeptical, others intrigued. Then, a voice pierced the room. "Princess Lyra, have you achieved anything in the human colony?" Lyra took a deep breath, standing taller than ever. "I have learned, I have grown, and I have survived," she said, her voice steady. "I have worked with the humans to protect lives. I have faced danger, and I have succeeded where failure seemed certain." The room was silent, disbelief spreading like a wave. Then, slowly, Ryland stepped forward, holding a small, glowing bundle wrapped in soft fabric. "And this," he said, "is proof of the future. Proof that life adapts. That courage and love create strength beyond what anyone expects." Lyra's heart swelled. She stepped forward, unveiling the bundle to the council. A soft murmur ran through the room. The infant inside, a living combination of Arinthian and human traits, glowed faintly under the chamber lights. Violet eyes, delicate crystalline skin, and small human features combined into a perfect miracle. The council was silent. Some bowed their heads in shame, realizing their cruel laughter had been misplaced. Others stared in awe, unable to reconcile their assumptions with the living proof before them. Lyra held her child firmly, her spine straight, her eyes blazing with quiet triumph. The Emperor finally spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "Lyra, my daughter, you have surpassed every expectation. You have not only represented our people with honor, but shown us what courage truly means." Lyra nodded, swallowing back tears. She felt every moment of doubt, every whispered insult, every fear of failure melt away. They had once judged her by what she could not do. Now they saw what she had achieved: life, love, and the bridge between worlds. Ryland smiled, standing beside her. "She never needed your approval," he said quietly to the council. "She only needed the chance." Lyra turned to him, a soft smile on her lips. She had feared the council's judgment, the laughter, the disbelief. But standing here, holding life in her hands, she understood. Her worth had never been defined by others' expectations. She was more than labels, more than doubts, more than fear. She was Lyra, the princess who had faced the universe and returned stronger than any counselor could imagine. The chamber erupted into applause, hesitant at first, then growing into genuine admiration. Humans and Arinthians alike began to whisper her name with respect, with awe, with hope. She had returned not as a princess who failed, but as a symbol of courage, resilience, and the impossible becoming possible. Lyra held her child close, the warmth of new life grounding her. She had come back to Arinth to face judgment, and instead, she had rewritten the story of her life. The empire that had laughed at her now stood in quiet reverence. And for the first time, Lyra felt complete, not because she had proven them right, but because she had proven herself. And in that moment, Lyra knew the universe had more challenges ahead, but she was ready. Stronger, wiser, unshakable. She had returned, and nothing would ever hold her back again. Years had passed since Princess Lyra returned to Arinth with her child, and Commander Ryland by her side. The empire had changed quietly, imperceptibly at first, and then with unstoppable momentum. Humans and Arinthians now worked together, sharing technology, culture, and knowledge. And Lyra's name was spoken with awe, a symbol of courage and possibility. No longer whispers of doubt. Lyra stood on the balcony of the royal palace, looking out over the city. Towers sparkled like crystals in the sunlight. Ships glided silently through the skyways, and below, children, both human and Arinthian, played together, without care for heritage or species. Her child, a lively little being with violet eyes and a curious mind, ran through the gardens laughing. Each step, each smile, was a reminder of what she had achieved. Her thoughts drifted back to the day she had left for Kepler 347, to the judgmental council and the whispers that branded her infertile. Back then, fear and shame had weighed heavily on her. She had wondered if she would ever be respected, if she would ever matter beyond her perceived failures. And yet, here she was, not just respected, but loved, admired, and remembered. Ryland joined her on the balcony, resting his hand on hers. "Do you remember the first day you arrived on Kepler 347? He asked quietly. Lyra smiled softly. "I thought I would fail. I thought the humans would see me as useless." Her violet eyes reflected the sunlight. "I didn't know then that the challenge wasn't just proving them wrong. It was proving myself right." Ryland squeezed her hand gently. "And you did. Beyond what anyone imagined." She looked down at their child, watching curiosity and wonder spark in the small face. All of this, it's more than I ever dreamed. Not because of what I did alone, but because I didn't stop believing." even when the universe seemed against me. The Empire had learned from her example. Councils now debated not just tradition, but possibility. Citizens celebrated courage over conformity. Humans and Orinthians worked side by side to explore, defend, and protect their worlds. Lyra had become a bridge, a living proof that difference could be strength, and doubt could be fuel for greatness. One evening, Lyra and Rylan took their child to the cliffs overlooking the ocean-like plains of Kepler 347, just as they had so many years ago. The twin moons reflected on the water, a reminder of beginnings and the endless cycles of life. The little one pointed at the moons, giggling, asking questions Lyra had never imagined. She answered with patience, curiosity, and joy. Feeling the legacy of her choices unfold in real time, Lyra's heart swelled with a quiet certainty. The world was bigger, stranger, and more beautiful than she had ever known. She had faced judgment, fear, and impossible odds, and emerged not just victorious, but stronger, wiser, and more alive than ever. The laughter that had once hurt her now fueled her, a reminder that even ridicule could not contain her spirit. Later that night, Lyra stood alone in the palace garden, gazing at the stars above. She thought of Orinth, of humans, of the countless challenges she had faced. Every moment of doubt, every whispered insult, had been a step toward this very life. She realized that true strength was not in avoiding fear, but in facing it, moving forward anyway, and embracing what was possible. And as she looked at the stars, Lyra smiled, knowing her story was far from over. She had changed the course of two worlds. She had become more than a princess. She had become a symbol of courage, resilience, and hope. The Empire would remember her. The humans would remember her. And one day, her child would grow to carry that legacy further. Lyra had turned ridicule into triumph, doubt into inspiration, and the impossible into reality. And in the quiet of the night, under the vast universe, Princess Lyra finally felt peace. She had returned, she had fought, and she had left a legacy that would never fade. Oobt. Yet she refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing her fall. She had learned to survive in their harsh world, to rise above whispered insults. But the thought of being sent to a human unknown, unpredictable, flawed stirred something unfamiliar, fear, when her father rose. Signaling the end of the council, Lyra's eyes met his. His gaze was heavy but filled with an unspoken apology. She understood what he could not say. This was not her failure, it was duty, politics, and survival. All entwined into a bitter path she must walk alone. Lyra left the chamber without a word, her robes flowing behind her like liquid starlight. She did not look at the council as she passed, though she felt their eyes pierce through her back. The hallways were silent now, yet every step she took felt louder than the laughter of the counselors. She wondered what awaited her on Kepler 347. Humans were said to be resilient, clever, and unpredictable, but she had no allies there. Only the weight of expectation and the whispers of her own inadequacy. In her private chambers, Lyra stood before a mirror, staring at her reflection. Her violet eyes shone with a cold determination. "I am more than their judgment," she whispered to herself. "I will not be defined by what I cannot do, but by what I will accomplish." Despite the fear, a small flame of defiance sparked in her heart. She remembered the lessons her mother had taught her long ago. Strength was not always loud, and courage was not always recognized. Sometimes it was the quiet decisions, the silent steps forward, that made the difference. As the transport ship was prepared for her journey, Lyra packed nothing but her essentials and her resolve. The laughter of the counselors faded behind her, replaced by the soft hum of the docking bay. The stars outside beckoned with cold brilliance. She did not know if she would succeed or fail. But one thing was certain. She would face the humans, face her fate, and face herself with unflinching determination. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the fear and the doubt, a quiet spark of hope whispered that this journey might change everything, not just for her, but for the empire that had once laughed at her. The council murmured among themselves, worried whispers echoing off the marble walls. Alara's jaw tightened. She had grown used to control, to being the voice that directed all decisions. But here, she felt an unusual pull in acknowledgement. That human resilience, raw and unshakable, could change the game. Suddenly, a messenger burst through the tall doors, breathless. "Your Highness! Reports from the northern borders, they have been overrun. Civilians are in danger. Our forces. They are holding barely." The room erupted into chaos. Nobles shouted, advisors gestured, fear filling the space like a rising tide. Alira's heart pounded. But she drew herself up taller, centering her mind. The queen could not show panic. Not now, not ever. Marcus moved closer to her side. His voice was calm, deliberate. Do not let fear dictate your actions. Lead them with clarity. Protect those who cannot protect themselves. Allura's chest tightened. She had always been a leader, but in that moment, she felt something stronger guiding her, something human, something she had underestimated. She took a deep breath, pushing aside the chaos, and nodded at Marcus. She could not explain why, but his words gave her focus. Without waiting for further instructions, she turned to the council. Prepare our forces. Send aid to the north immediately. And gather intelligence. We cannot fight blindly. Every move must count. The advisors looked at her in surprise, but they obeyed. Allura moved with purpose, her confidence returning, bolstered by the quiet strength at her side. Marcus did not interfere, did not command, yet his presence carried a subtle, unspoken authority. It was strange, unsettling, and empowering all at once. As the council dispersed to implement her orders, Allura lingered in the center of the chamber, her gaze fixed on Marcus. You have a way of seeing things I cannot, she said softly. Without you speaking much, you make me think, you make me stronger. Marcus nodded once, simply. Humans survive by noticing what others overlook. Sometimes silence says more than words. Sometimes courage is quiet. Allura's eyes softened, and a shiver of realization ran through her. This human, this outsider, had not only challenged her authority, he had inspired her in ways no one else could. And as the distant thunder of war echoed faintly beyond the palace walls, she understood one undeniable truth. Strength came in many forms, and sometimes, the quietest force was the most powerful. The northern skies were dark with smoke. Allura stood at the edge of the palace balcony, watching the distant horizon where fires burned and armies clashed. The smell of ash drifted faintly on the wind, and the cries of those in danger reached her ears even from afar. She clenched her fists, her knuckles white beneath the delicate gloves she wore. Marcus stood silently beside her, his eyes scanning the horizon as if he could see every hidden threat. He had said nothing since they arrived, but his presence was steady, anchoring her in the storm of panic and fear that the news had stirred. You cannot save them all, Marcus finally said, his voice low but firm. But you can make the choices that matter. Focus on what can be protected. Allura's heart throbbed. She had always believed a queen's duty was to protect every citizen, to control every outcome. But Marcus's words, simple and sharp, cut through the fog of her panic. Perhaps strength wasn't in trying to do everything. It was in making the right choices, even if they were hard. She turned to face him. And if I fail? She whispered, her voice trembling just slightly. If they blame me? Marcus's gaze held hers. Then you do what humans do best. You rise again, you fight, and you learn. Fear is the chain that binds, not the sword that saves. Allura felt a strange warmth in her chest. His words weren't comforting in a soft way, they were challenging. They demanded action, demanded courage. And yet, she knew he was right. Her people needed her focused, not paralyzed by guilt. She stepped back from the balcony, moving with deliberate purpose. Prepare the northern fleet, she ordered, her voice gaining strength with every word. Send medical aid and evacuate civilians where possible. Do not waste time on pride. Lives are more important than honor today. Marcus nodded quietly. Then lead them, he said. Lead like the human spirit, relentless and unwavering. Allura's chest rose and fell as determination settled over her. She had faced countless political games, manipulation, and betrayal in her life, but this felt different. This was raw, real, life and death. She felt alive in a way she hadn't before. And she realized that the human by her side, quiet and steady, had taught her something she had never learned in years of royal instruction. Courage wasn't about appearing strong. It was about facing what terrified you and choosing to act anyway. Orders were given, messengers dispatched, and the palace erupted into organized chaos. Allura moved through the corridors with purpose, her mind clear, her vision focused. Yet she could not shake the awareness of Marcus's gaze on her, the quiet strength behind those human eyes that seemed to mirror her own rising determination. Later, in a private chamber, she finally allowed herself to sit. Her fingers traced the carved edge of her throne as if grounding herself to the reality of what had just begun. Marcus stood at the doorway, silent but alert. His calm presence was a contrast to the storm of emotions raging inside her. You make me think in ways I cannot explain, Allura admitted softly, almost to herself. I have faced threats, wars, and betrayal before, but never like this. Never someone who changes me without trying. Marcus's eyes softened just slightly. That is the power humans carry. We are flawed, fragile, but when we face the impossible, we do not break. And sometimes we inspire others to do the same. Alara leaned back, a small, exhausted smile touching her lips. She realized she had a choice, not just about her people, but about herself. She could continue to be a queen who controlled everything from a distance, or she could learn from the quiet strength beside her, the human who refused to bow or falter, and become something greater. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel the weight of the crown as a burden. She felt it as a challenge, when she was ready to meet side by side with Marcus, and with the courage she had only just begun to understand. The northern horizon was aflame, a roaring wall of fire and smoke that painted the sky in red and gold. Alara stood at the command balcony of the palace, her heart pounding as she watched the chaos unfold below. Soldiers scrambled, civilians ran for safety, and the clash of weapons echoed across the valley. Her mind raced, balancing strategies, decisions, and fears, but beneath it all, she felt a strange calm. Marcus stood silently at her side, eyes scanning the battlefield. He did not shout orders, did not panic. He simply observed, calm and unwavering, his presence grounding her. Alara found herself stealing glances at him, realizing that his quiet strength gave her the courage to act decisively, even when her instincts screamed doubt. "Your Highness," a general shouted from below, "we can hold them off for now, but reinforcements will be needed immediately." Alara nodded sharply. "Send the northern fleet. Evacuate the civilians. Prioritize life over pride. And position archers along the ridge. Give them every advantage we can." Her voice rang clear, commanding, yet carried the urgency of someone who understood the cost of delay. Marcus finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "Do not waste energy trying to control every detail. Trust your people to follow your lead. You cannot be everywhere, but your decisions can still save them." Alara's eyes softened. His words were a mirror of her own doubts and fears, yet they pushed her forward rather than holding her back. She realized then that leadership was not about perfection, it was about courage, and sometimes the courage to trust others. Hours passed, and the battle raged on. Fires spread, walls shook, and the cries of the wounded filled the air. Alara moved through the command center, giving orders, checking updates, coordinating evacuations. Every choice she made carried weight, every decision held lives in the balance. And all the while, Marcus remained beside her, calm and observant, never interfering, yet somehow influencing her with his quiet resolve. As night fell, the flames still flickered across the horizon, but the tide of battle slowly turned. Alara's forces, guided by her decisive actions, had begun to push back the invaders. Soldiers cheered, civilians were moved to safety, and a cautious hope returned to the eyes of those around her. Yet Alara did not smile. She had won the battle, but the cost was heavy. She had seen bravery, fear, and sacrifice in ways she had never imagined. And through it all, one thought remained clear. Marcus had changed her. His presence had sharpened her decisions, his quiet strength had steadied her fears, and his courage had reminded her that even a queen could grow stronger through trust and resolve. Finally, as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, Alara stepped onto the balcony again, looking at the aftermath. Soldiers tended the wounded, citizens huddled together, and the smoke began to clear. She exhaled slowly, feeling both exhaustion and clarity. Marcus remained at her side, silent as always. She turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. You make me see things differently. I have led for years, yet tonight, you taught me what it means to be brave, not just in title, but in heart." He nodded once, eyes steady. "Courage is not the absence of fear. It is facing it and moving forward. Tonight, you did that. You led, and you inspired." Alara's chest tightened. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel gratitude, not for gifts or loyalty, but for the quiet power that one human had brought into her life. She realized that strength was not about command alone, nor was it about the crown she wore. Strength was about heart and determination, and the courage to rise even when the world seemed against you. As the sun rose, casting a warm light over the recovering city, Alara knew one undeniable truth. She would never underestimate humans again. Not Marcus. Not the resilience that humans carried within them. And perhaps, just perhaps, she would never be the same queen again. The battle was over, but the palace was far from peaceful. Fires had been extinguished, but the scent of smoke lingered in the halls. Soldiers and servants moved quickly, clearing debris and aiding the wounded. Queen Alara walked through the corridors, her silver gown smudged with ash and dust. For the first time in her life, she felt the exhaustion of someone who had faced true danger, not just political gains or courtly rivalries, but the raw, unpredictable chaos of life and death. Marcus walked silently beside her, as he had through the battle, but now his presence felt different. It was less a guide and more a quiet reassurance, a steady reminder that strength could exist without shouting or force. Alara noticed small things she hadn't before: the way he moved with care, the way his eyes scanned every corner, the subtle readiness in his stance. He was vigilant, not because he feared, but because he chose to protect. "Your Highness," Marcus said quietly, breaking the silence. "You led well today. You made choices that mattered. You didn't just command, you inspired." Alara glanced at him, her chest tightening. I don't know if I'm worthy of that praise. I made mistakes. I could have done more. People suffered because of decisions I had to make." Marcus shook his head gently. "Mistakes are part of being human, and part of being a leader. What matters is what you do after them. You acted with courage. That is what they will remember." Her eyes softened. She had spent years learning how to rule with precision, yet it was Marcus, a human, who had shown her the strength and compassion and resilience. She realized she had been blind to the subtle power humans carried, the quiet determination, the stubborn courage, the ability to rise no matter how harsh the world became. For a long moment, they walked together in silence, the echo of their footsteps mingling with the distant sounds of recovery. Alara felt a strange warmth in her chest, a mix of admiration and trust she had never offered freely to anyone. Marcus did not seek it, and yet his presence drew it out. "You were never just a soldier or a visitor," she said softly, almost to herself. "You were a reminder that strength can exist in ways I have never known, that even a queen can learn something from someone unexpected." Marcus's gaze softened. "Humans survive because we must. We adapt, we endure, and sometimes we teach others to endure with us." Alara's lips curved in a small, tired smile. She leaned slightly against the wall, letting herself feel the weight of the day. "I used to think leadership meant control, but today I learned that it also means trust. Trust in others, even when the outcome is uncertain. Trust and courage, even when it comes from someone you did not expect." He said nothing, simply standing beside her, a silent witness to her realization. And in that silence, Alara felt something deep in a quiet bond, not spoken in words, but felt in shared experience and mutual respect. Hours passed, and the palace slowly settled. Alara retreated to her private chambers, weary but awake in a new way. Marcus remained near the door, not intruding, but a calm presence that made the room feel less lonely. She realized that this human, who had offended her once with his quiet defiance, had become her anchor in a storm she had never imagined. Alara closed her eyes for a moment, thinking about what had changed in her. She had been tested, not by armies, not by politics, but by courage in its purest, simplest form. Marcus had shown her that fear could be met with action, that silence could carry power, and that even a queen could grow stronger through humility and understanding. When she opened her eyes again, Marcus was still there, watching, steady. And she knew, without needing words, that she had found an ally unlike any other. Someone who challenged her, inspired her, and reminded her that humanity, fragile, unpredictable, bold, was a force worth respecting, and perhaps even trusting with her heart. The night deepened, but Alara no longer felt alone. She had faced fire, chaos, and doubt. And beside her, a human had stood unwavering. For the first time, she understood that strength was not just in the crown or the throne, but in the courage to face life and trust someone else to stand beside you. Dawn broke over the palace of Zerethia, painting the skies in shades of gold and crimson. The battle was over, the fires mostly extinguished, but the echoes of chaos lingered in the air. Queen Alara stood on the palace balcony, gazing at the valley below. Soldiers were helping rebuild what had been lost. Civilians moved cautiously through the streets, and life, stubborn as ever, began to return. Beside her, Marcus remained silent as he had from the beginning. Yet his quiet presence felt stronger than any army, steadier than any wall, and more enduring than the tallest towers of her kingdom. Alara's gaze met his, and in that moment, words were unnecessary. Everything she had learned over the past days, the courage, the resilience, the unexpected strength, was reflected in his calm, unwavering eyes. "You changed the way I see things," Alara said softly, her voice barely more than a whisper. I thought I understood strength. I thought I knew what it meant to lead. But you showed me something else. Something I could never have learned from advisors or books. Marcus's eyes softened. I did nothing but stand beside you. You led, Your Highness. You chose courage when fear wanted to stop you. I only reminded you what you already carried. Alara shook her head gently, a faint smile brushing her lips. No, you remind me that even someone unexpected, someone I once thought inferior, can teach me lessons I could never learn alone. Humans, they are fragile, yes. But their hearts, their courage, it is boundless. The wind stirred her hair, carrying with it the scent of smoke and ash. She could see the cost of the battle etched in the streets, in the weary faces of her people. Yet she also saw hope, the same hope that Marcus carried without words. The quiet confidence that inspired those around him to rise despite the impossible. She turned fully toward him, her eyes searching his face. I cannot undo the offenses I once felt toward you. I underestimated you. I thought your silence was weakness. But I see now that it was your strength. And for that, I am grateful. Marcus allowed a small nod, his expression calm. But she sensed something unspoken, respect, trust, and perhaps something more profound. Something beyond words. Alara took a deep breath, letting the crisp morning air fill her lungs. She felt lighter somehow, as if the weight of the crown had shifted, not removed, but shared with someone who had earned her trust. The human had not bowed to her, had not begged for favor, had simply stood and remained true to himself. And in doing so, he had changed her, changed the kingdom, and reminded her that true power often comes in quiet forms. Today, she said, her voice gaining strength, we survived because of courage, not fear, because of resolve, not arrogance, and because even when the world tried to break us, we rose humans and Xerithians together. Marcus said nothing, but the faintest hint of a smile touched his lips. It was enough. Words were unnecessary now. The battle, the fear, the lessons, they had all led to this moment. A mutual understanding. An unspoken bond that bridged species, culture, and expectation. Alara looked out over her kingdom. At the people who were beginning to rebuild, to live, to hope again. She realized that the human beside her, once underestimated, had shown her the essence of what it meant to be alive, to lead, to survive, and to trust. Her chest rose with determination, her heart steady and unwavering. We will face the future together, she said softly, yet with authority. And we will not falter, because we understand what strength truly is. Not the power to command, but the courage to stand, even when all seems lost. Marcus's eyes met hers, steady and true. No words were needed. His silence spoke of loyalty, courage, and the indomitable spirit of humanity. And in that quiet, Alara felt a surge of hope stronger than any army, greater than any throne. For the first time, she knew with absolute certainty, humans were not fragile. They were unstoppable. And together, they would rise above anything the universe dared to throw at them. The sun climbed higher, casting its golden light across the recovering kingdom. And in that light, Queen Alara and the human who stood beside her, Marcus, faced the future not with fear, but with courage, determination, and a bond that no force could break.